Podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey everybody, we're back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we are here to give you more knowledge, more light, more love. Thank you for joining us today. We have an incredible guest I'm super excited about. His name is Josh Hernandez. He founded SectionZ Records. He has incredible history in the electronic music scene. We're going to get to him in just a second. I'm so excited he's here. First, I have to ask you to just do a few things for me. First thing, friends, follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That's the address. That's how we do it now. It's the 21st century. It's now 2021. Hello, 2021. Go to Instagram. Please follow me. Also, if you're a Spotify user, please follow me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever you go to get your podcasts. Please like, comment, follow, whatever the button says to do, like join. I don't know. Do it though for me. And the biggest thing is that I always say is please, please, please tell a friend, because without word of mouth, without you telling the people you know that like these type of podcasts, this type of conversation, without you telling them, they just, it's going to be that much longer until they figure it out. So you got to be there for me. Emissary of lights, emissary of love in your neighborhood, at your job. Tell your friends. Midnight on Earth. So now that we got that out of the way, I would like to introduce you to Joshua Hernandez. And I'm going to read a bio that we have for him right here. Josh Hernandez is an incredible human, massive influence on the modern EDM culture, and longtime stalwart of the electronic music scene. Josh founded SectionZ Records, which was an electronic record label and artist management company. Having its origins in 1999 and closing its doors in 2016, SectionZ was an artist collective which spawned the careers of hundreds of electronic musicians, including Deadmau5, huge name, Deadmau5, Savant, another huge name, Virtual Riot, Toby Emerson, Liquid Flow, Kaster, Muji, Sanskrit, Mr. Bill, Siren Seol, that guy, oh my God, and countless others. Okay, countless others. Sorry, I just went a little tangent there. SectionZ consistently found and grew the artists who emerged to define the new sounds of EDM, and they empowered the musicians themselves through peer connections and support. Currently, Josh Hernandez is heading up Zyon Management and Consulting, which is the evolution of SectionZ and furthers those same pursuits. Hello, Josh. How are we feeling today?
Hey. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, did you like that bio? That was pretty amazing, huh?
That's good. I appreciate it.
There's not one thing that's inaccurate about that bio. I have to tell you, you've been a huge force in the electronic music scene over the last 20 years, and I just appreciate your efforts.
It's interesting because I've been the guy who just never wanted to take pictures with their artists and just been in the background this whole time. And, you get the work done, but those were, to me, medieval times compared to where we're going next.
Well, you're here, you're in the now. Not only were you there then, but you're here now, and right now is just important as then. We're just in the waves, constantly in the midst of it.
Well, it's just being able to witness just so many changes over the years from when, the bedroom composer was not a real term to now it's a whole cottage industry, right? We have millions of artists around the world that are aspiring to become, a known name brand in the electronic music scene. And there's so many different scenes and sub scenes within that. And I remember when there was none of this. It was just a few genres. I remember dancing in clubs where Paul Oakenfold and Tiesto, they were in the booth, but we didn't give a fuck. We were dancing and we were listening to the music and enjoying what was happening with our friends and on the dance floor. And, just seeing all that history pass and become something as big as it is today is great, but understanding that this is just the foundational layer for, if it's 10,000 artists today viable around the world, maybe even more than that, in 100 years from now, it's going to be 1 million.
Yeah, it's exponentially growing, and electronic music and all its various subgenres, if you just collect it all as electronic music, it's been a massive force in the music industry within the last 20 years. And in fact, it's dominated the world music industry. Wouldn't you say?
Well, the access to technology to create music is really what's changed the game. You can, from a craft perspective, create a full hit in a day, and and nobody will be in your way. You can do that completely alone. You can do it with tens and thousands of vocal samples that are accessible to you, like on the fly with things like Splice. You can literally acquire the knowledge in the course of a week to write your own sound VST plugins.
Yeah, the technology has advanced so much that literally you can have the equivalent of a multi-million-dollar studio of the 70s or 80s or even the 90s in a one computer with a couple accessories.
Well, that shit's in your pocket now.
Yeah. I guess so. It's even micronized down to the pocket level.
Yeah, your desktop is a few of those. It's also a 3D. It's also a 3D studio, a video game making machine. It's right now your lifeline to your friends and family.
Yeah,
it's a very powerful device.
Right, and also it's given so much freedom to these artists who may have felt restrained by the lack of equipment or lack of means of recording their ideas. But now it's so simple and so easy if you understand it and figure it out. It really is easy, and then boom, what you express from your mind can be right out there musically. And
it's all about just being able to dominate your interface, right? So use Ableton or Fruity Loops, or FL Studio or whatever. It's all about understanding and dominating that interface so you can get your ideas from your head to the speakers as fast as possible.
Because that is the instrument, you could say, of the electronic producer, because not only are they composing these massive compositions and composing all the parts, you could say, for each instrument, or they're composing every sound, they're also using these DAWs, these digital audio workstations. For those that don't know what a DAW is, it's called a digital audio workstation. They're using these DAWs as instruments, which are incredibly more complicated and sophisticated than some of the instruments that people play professionally.
Well, right. We have a nomenclature around what an instrument, not a nomenclature. We have a general understanding of what an instrument is, right? In the mass market, a guitar, drums, things like that, a piano. These are also instruments. A computer has all those things. And eventually when computers are all quantum based, they'll be run in quantum strings. So it doesn't matter. It's really about the tool that allows the brain to express sound. And if it's the guitar, that's pretty quick, right? And pretty well known. If it's the drum, same thing. But the computer just is, it's a universe. of possibilities. My puppy is begging, or my dog, she's 2.5 years old, she's begging me for a treat.
Will you
right
please
now.
give her a treat worldwide? We're now in 27 countries. We're all listening to you. Give your dog a treat. What is your dog's name?
Juno.
Juno,
the goddess of marriage and love,
yeah.
key to making good music and staying afloat in this scene.
Sure,
So,
yeah. Let's keep our pets happy.
give me literally like 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. We talked
Oh,
about
baby.
how important pets are and how much they mean to us when we spoke to Natalie Lucia Anderson, who could channel the spirits of deceased pets and also living pets. And we're back with Josh Hernandez. Okay, so let's walk it back a little bit. Let's talk about the beginnings of you in electronic music, because it seems like you've been around since technology evolved enough to where computers were starting to be used more as instruments and as interfaces. So as a personal experience, when did you develop interest in electronic music? Like, when did you notice that you were attracted to that type of music?
Well, to me, it was the Nintendo Entertainment System, and even before that, the Commodore 64. Like just the sounds and the repetitiveness of those kinds of things in games, right? Turned something on, and I was obsessed with it to the point where I would jerry rig my Nintendo or my Sega Genesis or whatever console I had to tape players so I can record the background audio to whatever game I could get my hands on. And I had a collection of hundreds of tapes at one point. And then techno started, right? Quadriphonia was a track that I remember very, very vividly in my brain that just screamed dancing and nothing else.
And who is that composed by? Who is Quadriphonia?
Quadriphonia, I think it's by I think it's Quadriphonia by Quadriphonia.
Oh, okay.
Like it's back then, making tracks like these were not as easy as today, and it took these guys a lot more time. You had a lot of folks that would just have one track that they would be able to get to vinyl, and if that wasn't a hit or got into the clubs or whatever, they never made another song. Today we have tens of thousands of tracks going online every single week.
It's pretty mind-blowing, the output.
Yeah. Right. So techno from there, and then during college, I spent a lot of time in the clubs, dancing to house, and saw the introduction of drum and bass to the scene. And that's when it really hit me. This stuff is evolving, and it's ever so changing. And there are so many genres now. And I started to follow the artists at that point. I stopped to think about whatever the DJ was playing, or the genre was in the club. And I was like, who's making these songs? And I need to know who's making these songs, and figure that stuff out. And back then it was a pretty disjointed universe, right?
Right, because it seems like originally, like you were saying, just to just point out that most people processed electronic music when they went to a rave or they went to a big house party. They weren't necessarily thinking about the DJs and the tracks. They were just going by style. So you'd go into a room, there'd be drum and bass, there'd be jungle, there'd be, these other styles like house music, but you weren't thinking about, oh, what song was that? It was just kind of the rhythm, the style, and the space for it. And that changed. That started changing for people, because I remember when that changed for me when I first heard Square Pusher, and that changed my life in 2002, because I used to process electronic music that way. I heard My Name Is Square Pusher, I think it's called, the original from like way back, that track, but it was just insane. It was slowed down drum and bass, and it had such unique composition that I was like, this is something completely different.
My Red Hot Car.
Okay. There you go.
the one for me.
Oh yeah,
and,
it's incredible.
Just the chops and just the deliberate arrangement. But it's why they called it intelligent dance music, right? It was fucking just mathy and geeky, and you had to be purposeful. There were a lot of rules around what they were trying to do.
Right, that's when it was IDM. I forgot about IDM.
Right. And he probably wouldn't have called it that. That was just, that was us. That was us trying to figure out what the fuck was going on.
It was mind blowing.
We were trying to describe what was going on to people, and that's how genres actually, really take hold. It's like it's describing a movement of musicians, of sound. When there's a hot sound, all the producers want to do it.
Right.
And that's cool because that fills up the genres, and that makes club mixes and all that kind of stuff possible, right? Otherwise, we would just be curating the top 60 tracks in EDM every year, and that's like we'd just be looking forward to those singles. And no, there's a mountain of stuff because there's a mountain of there's a mountain of moments that require this music.
Right. So you're
not just parties.
You're noticing this shift from style to composition, and it's attracting you more. Right. And right. Is this the point where you start to formulate what SectionZ will become?
No, at this point I start thinking I want to make electronic music.
All right.
and how is it done? And clearly you need a computer, and just went through that entire process while going through art school, and then moving to Chicago from Puerto Rico, and that was a pretty big event in my life because Chicago was an electronic music culture like I had never experienced. In Puerto Rico, I was in my own head, right, with my video game music, and some of my friends liked it. Then the youth club scene, which just exists no matter what, period. Like it's going to always be there. The music that's played, who knows what it's going to be, right? But Chicago was house music. Chicago was drum and bass parties. Chicago was alternative fucking rock that blended in with all the punk side of the electronic side of the scene. Smashing Pumpkins is a product of this smashing of cultures and things of this city.
So you noticed that Chicago had this melting pot of different styles, and then the support, the audience was there. They were enthralled by the music, and you saw it in all the different sectors that were around Chicago.
There was a club called Shelter. Shelter had several rooms. I don't remember exactly how many, to be honest. Always stoned. And back then, pot did a lot more to me than it does these days. And I used to drink a lot more back then.
Sure.
But it had many rooms, many genres, many people vying for your attention, many vibes. And that's what I was saying. Like it's just this pot of things. And my interest in programming, I start to do digital websites and marketing. I started working for a marketing company at the time, and my interest in creating websites and active websites, right? The websites that did stuff, because when SectionZ formed originally, it wasn't a community or a record label or anything. It was a band of like-minded Fruity Loops musicians, and we were exchanging Fruity Loops files and samples with each other, so we could see how we did stuff, and then we collaborate. I do 16 bars, pass it on. Another artist would do 16 bars in Greece, pass it on. Another artist in Canada would do 16 bars, pass it on. And then 5 or 6 artists later, we had this 6-minute crazy ass collab where everybody's trying to peacock what they know about electronic music at the time. And we would put these finished things up on a Microsoft front page driven website at the time, pure HTML, like files uploaded painstakingly via FTP, taking forever via pre-DSL connections, right?
5K a second.
Yeah. So here's our 12-track album of crazy Fruity Loops music, right? And I got emails from other people in the community because I was also helping ImageLine, the people who run Fruity Loops, with the community side, the forums and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Which I got involved with because they busted me with a cracked version of Fruity Loops, so they put me to work on their forums.
They're like, "Hey there, buddy. We noticed your serial number says Happy Joy Joy."
Yep.
That's actually not official.
Yeah, true story. Literally, you got it.
That's funny.
So I started to get other emails from people in the community like, "Hey, could you put up my EP? Could you put up my track? Could you put up our project?" And it became a list of 100 songs and then 200 songs. And all this was like manual fucking input it in, it wasn't like your SoundCloud uploader or whatever.
Right. It took some time per track.
Your audience currency drops weren't happening then. So I'm like, this is awesome, but it sucks because I was in a pretty terrible marriage at the time, pretty young to be married, too young.
Okay.
And I needed to get out of that, and it did happen. But I was also learning how to code active ASP websites and the back end stuff, and finally automated all of that process. And the SectionZ community was born. And that went from year one, about 500 or so artists signed up and uploading their FL Studio files and their samples and their MIDI and the whole thing for the whole world to download, share, and figure out how to do shit with. And today you get emails from managers like, "Hey, this melody and stuff sounds pretty similar to my guy's remix from 3,000 years ago. Like, are you sure they're not? Like, did they make this themselves?" And I'm like, and I'm seriously I wish you could see my face. I'm just like, man, I was like, they love the artist that you represent. I'm sorry that this happens. But back in the day, we didn't think this way, like at all. We used to literally be able to share our entire fucking project files, and that's how we learned from each other. That's how it evolved so quickly.
So there was no coveting of the artists of that time of their unique sound designs, their sound, the whatever bass kick that they came up with that was so deep and powerful.
Bullshit, imperialistic style management, like making the artist this golden goose egg that is like untouchable and sensitive. And they turned it into this like, guarded type of game that exists today where artists think that, they're a little bit more special than they are.
But back then it was so new. It was all egoless, right? It was so new.
Right.
There was people couldn't even attach an ego to it because it was just all fresh.
We didn't have our James Brown yet.
Yeah. So then when did you notice that SectionZ, now that you had these artists coming on board and things were happening, when did it start to become successful? Not just monetarily, but when it actually started to influence culture?
I'd say that when there was about 15,000 or so musicians, but the sad part was that we just didn't know what we had. like if you go back and really fundamentally break down that website, it was SoundCloud way before SoundCloud, right?
Oh, wow.
And we just didn't know what we had. I didn't know what I had. I didn't understand that it was anything more than just this community, right? I didn't see it as a business model. And everybody's trying to tell me like, you need to find a business model and whatever. And I'm like, no, I just want artists to put up their music here and show it to the world. Like, what's the big deal?
So it was, in a sense, this proto SoundCloud, But you were doing
Right.
it sheerly out of the love of community and the music itself.
Correct. It's running out of an actual real server center downtown Chicago, costs
Oh
hundreds of
my
dollars
God.
to run a month. And at some points when we were doing competitions like the Summer Electronic Music Games, it would cost thousands of dollars to host because we had a lot of traffic. We had actual printed press things happening at the time.
So where was the money coming from that was enabling you to pay for this stuff? Were you getting revenue from downloads, or were people donating?
First job. My first job paid for the second passion. Like then all the downloads were free. The only thing that was gated was actual participation. Like if you were going to upload to SectionZ, you had to review music on the website. You had to go and participate in the community. Like that was the only thing that I thought to gate. I didn't think anything else on that side.
That's
And
so ahead of its time.
I'm over here building other businesses on the side, right? Like I'm working for advertising agencies, public relations firms. I'm working for at one point myself with dozens of clients creating websites and real estate websites and all sorts of stuff back in the day. I didn't think about it that way. To me, it was just like a way to help people learn how to make electronic music because nobody knew how to work the DAWs at the time.
So then how did this online community, this proto SoundCloud, which is absolute genius, by the way, just want to say that you're a trendsetter, trailblazer, absolute genius. When did it morph into more of a management type situation?
So that was years after the community hit its peak, right? Because after doing the Deadmau5 demo and us like parting ways, I went on to go to fill a goal of mine, which was to create video games, right? another obsession with the music soundtracks of the video games was the video games themselves. Right. So
you had this artist, I mean, his name's Joel Zimmerman. He goes by Deadmau5 now, but at the time when he first started working with you, he was going by
like
Halcyon 441. Yes. And
that was his community name.
Right. And you guys had an actual release together, SectionZ Volume 1, way back in 2002.
That was to help fund the community, right?
Okay.
And it featured what I thought were the most active community members, the leaders in the community, the ones that were online creating dialogue with each other, that kind of stuff, and we're really figuring out how to get that professional sound, right, and that group of people.
So before SectionZ became a record label, you had this online community, and you had some artists, some that you featured specifically, that were doing really well. But was Joel's career really taking off at that point? Was he like the star of your scene, or how did that work?
Back then it didn't work like that, right? Like we didn't have this hierarchical system that got put in place kind of, by them anyway. But it was very, very small community, small town feel, like where I'm from, I still drive things like that. Like we have to be family driven and we have to help each other out kind of stuff. His stuff took off after. I was already well on my way to start my first video game when his stuff started to take off. We parted ways before he even got involved with Play Me Records. And it was at my choice. We had a little falling out because of an event that happened in his life, and he even asked me to come back, and I wanted to go make video games at the time, so I didn't even think I knew he was going to be successful anyway. It's like it doesn't need my fucking help.
So he asked you to come back. That was like circa 2005, you would say?
Yeah, around there, 2005, 6.
And really, you've been public about the fact in the past, you had a big article on youredm.com that caused a little controversy. And of course,
that's right.
There was other articles where you've just been public about being a force in his career early on. And you've also been public about the fact that you kind of parted ways because of the fact that he wanted to take on this dead mouse persona. Is that true, or is that a misconception?
No, that's a total misconception.
Okay.
Like, where the falling out was I was asked to be interviewed by UEDM, which is pretty much like the biggest joke publication to me. And
at the time they were doing okay, but yeah, they've since tapered off quite a bit 7 or so years later.
Well, right, and you know, even today they do good work. They interview the people and stuff like that. It's just, you know, it's a little half baked. It's a little
contrived.
You know, it could be bigger. It could be way bigger. It could be way more. It could be way better. Anyway, so I was asked to be interviewed. I was asked questions about like my origin story with him, which I answered to the fidelity of my knowledge. And it just turned out that hadn't been how anybody had been informed of the origin of that head, right? And he asked them to take it down. And then it became a controversy because then they became all papers, please. I needed to prove to them that I was their manager, that I was his manager. And I've never said I was his manager. I was very early in his career. I was running SectionZ. Obviously, I was doing managerial type things that an artist would need that later one would consider to be management, right? but at the time, like visa stuff, like a lot of artists come to me now because I can get your fucking visa if you got a real career, right? If you're not begging for shows, if you're a real potential artist that can travel the world and become an international star, I can help you get your visa, period. And I've done dozens now. And it all started because of that experience, right? I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I needed to get from the US to Canada. We were trying to figure out a bunch of things out. And then on top of that, helped them to print his demo out, which back then printing a CD out wasn't a fucking easy thing to do. There wasn't a website you went and you uploaded stuff to.
So people said you were his manager, but you never actually publicly claimed to be his manager, except the fact that you probably did 99.5% of what is considered to be managerial duties.
I mean, shit. Look, my whole thing with him right now is I've tried to mend that bridge a couple times. He thinks every time I try to talk to him, I'm trying to extract like text libel or some bullshit. The mind's poisoned by lawyers. I've done nothing but continue to do what I did when I found him, which is continue to find musicians around the world, empower them, help them when they need it. Just like him, send them a couple $100 if they're broke. Like when nobody knows who the fuck they are, I've usually been there first. And that's simple. Because I follow the trends and I follow the talent that I learned because of those experiences way back then, right? I'm not trying to contrive like my history with people because I want to write a book that has the accurate depiction of that whole thing, from the drive to Chicago to Niagara Falls in a snowstorm to do this first show. I have the right to tell my life story, whether he decides if he's going to like it or not.
Damn right you do.
So on that side, just to clarify, if you go back, so UEDM goes all papers, please on me. And I'm like, all right, I show him a couple of screenshots, like a letter that we wrote to Steve Duda for, some sponsorship to have him come to the US. And that's it. They don't get anything else. Like you guys asked me for the interview and then all of a sudden you asked me to prove my 10-point management red light fucking documentation stuff.
After the interview.
Yeah. Right. And then as I find out later, they blacklisted me and it's my fault that I tell my story. I'll get them.
Well, I think your story will be told right now. It's being told, around the world to 26 countries, potentially 27, I think now. But so okay. So to get away from that, because now we've cleared up some misconceptions about all that, which, you know, people like to gossip. They like to say various things on forums. Now we know the truth. Josh Hernandez will come back anytime and clear up anything that you want him to.
Yep.
But okay,
Easy.
so you're making video games at that point, but then you want to go back to music. What called you back to SectionZ?
Savant.
Okay.
Shannon McGill, who was running the community at the time while I was doing school and doing the video game school stuff. And he was instrumental in keeping the community alive during that time.
Savant was.
No. Shannon McGill was.
Shannon McGill. Oh yeah, he used. I remember he was the host when you guys had a SectionZ podcast.
Yeah.
Actually,
That's
I
right.
remember that.
And he had a similar conviction to my own, very community driven stuff like that. And they reach out to me. It's like, hey, this Savant thing's kind of taken off, and what do we do? And how do we know how much to ask for bookings? And I explained to them formulas and the business model side of things. And at the time, I had just started a startup with one of the co-founders of Groupon, because I was working for their investment firm as their entrepreneur in residence, helping them vet investments such as Instacart. You know, and I take advantage of a Christmas party that they're having because they knew that I'd like music and that I like did the talent thing, and they're like, "Yo, could you get Deadmau5 to come to our Christmas party?" It's like, no, but I got something better. And I was like, Savant, he's like the newest thing. Like, you got to hear him. And this is all for an office party.
Oh my gosh.
I mean? You know? But these are some of the most fucking rich and influential people in Chicago technology. And I saw the opportunity to bring, you know, some culture here, get to meet him in person. Because I had obviously like met him online when he was like 16 years old.
Yeah, and let's just clear it up for people that have never heard of Savant before, because there's so many listeners that may not have. Savant is an incredible electronic artist from Norway, and he has some superhuman composition skills, and he has a life that gives him the ability to focus on electronic music in such a way that he's able to almost instantly download music and get it out through the DAW onto a platform.
He speaks with God in my mind.
I've thought that many times. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on the origin of Savant for people that have never heard of him before?
So he was a SectionZ community member named Morphine, and he's a ultra talented musician, visual. He's written scripts that I've read that are fucking crazy incredible. Now he's doing video games. Right now he's working at a video game company that helped him do his award-winning video game, Savant Ascent, which is available on the Steam store and iOS and Android still, and it's a really popular game. Won awards, if I already said that.
Yeah.
And he's just one of these. He's fucking Leonardo da Vinci, man. He does everything.
When I first discovered Savant's music, and we'll go back into Josh for a second, but you got to get a little Savant context. When I first discovered Savant's music, it was in 2012. Excuse me, 2000. Was it 10? No, it was 12. 2012. I was talent scouting for a festival. They wanted me to book electronic artists, and I really was diving in to try to find the newest sounds. I discovered this guy from England. Okay. His name was, well, at the time, now it's Mizuki. He used to go by Mizuki's Last Chance. Okay. So I'm listening to Mizuki's Last Chance. Incredible music. He had the 8-bit, you know, he was the first one of the first artists that people described as chip step, which is like 8-bit chip tune mixed with dubstep sounds. Yeah. And then one day, so I followed him on Facebook, and one day he was going gaga. He was incredibly enamored with this guy named Savant, who had just came out with this album called Ism. And he was just talking about how this guy was the greatest guy's ever heard in his life. And I felt that Mizuki's Last Chance was amazing. So I was feeling that if he thought Savant was the greatest thing since sliced bread, then I better go check this guy out. And when I did, I was absolutely astounded, not only by, like I said, his superhuman composition skills, but just the way his music makes you feel. Transcends genres. He's one of those artists where you feel his energy coming through the music more than the music. You feel him, you feel how he composes coming through the music versus just the sounds themselves. And then when you focus on the sounds and the compositions, it's absolutely mind-blowing.
And that's I mean, I could have said it better.
Okay, so now Savant's blowing up. This is, let's put a year on it. You're thinking 2011, 2012, 2010. Where are we at with this?
Right. So I think we're at about 2012.
Okay.
And I'm asked
So you're
to,
advising Shannon and everyone at Section Z.
Advising Shannon and Alex about what's happening, the tour side of things. They have an agent and all that. I'm asked to go drive them, from gig to gig to help save some money, right?
Okay.
And I don't know who the agent is at the time. It turns out he ends up being a shyster and shafts Savant for almost 17 grand. But at the time, I got to watch the rocket ship and drive the rocket ship while he was doing his debut tour here. And then it also became painfully obvious that he needed a more professional business approach to what the management side was doing, right? And even though I wasn't a formal artist manager, I was asked specifically by him to just, here, I need you to take over what's happening with my career, because there's too many hands in my pots and too many things going on, and I need complete control. So he's like, can you do this for me? And at the time, I was a director of innovation at one of the hottest mobile development companies in Chicago. And I was literally learning how to go full artist management with Savant, and I'm selling millions of dollars worth of applications and business to like Fortune 500 companies here in Chicago.
So you had the opportunity
traveling.
to stay in the business world if you wanted to, or now take on this other role.
Right. And the duality plays itself out because traveling the world with Alex, that first time, seeing the US, seeing people, seeing technology, made me really question what I was doing on that side, right, on the technology side. And then already doing A&R on the SectionZ side, by immediately choosing to work with a very young virtual Riot, a very hungry and ambitious Mr. Bill, who could give albums at a time just like Alex, right? Who I picked because I thought he would bring IDM type sound and structure to the pop scene, right? Once he got his head out of his ass, and he has in a big way.
You know, he was one of the first artists that I noticed he kind of crossed over into the Burning Man kind of hippie jam band scene. I saw his name on a lot of festival posters before any of the other artists you mentioned.
It's just smart shit. And that's a blessing and a curse, because his ambition is, I think, like, man, it's music perfection, it's song perfection, and I think he's achieved where he wants to go. I can't talk about what I know now, but
sure.
It's good stuff there.
So Section Z, though, at that point when Savant's career was taking off, he's asking you to be his full-on management personnel and taking care of all those aspects of his life. Was that also when you solidified what Section Z was? Right.
At that point, we're pumping out fucking records.
Okay.
Like, at a pretty big pace. Like, at one point we're doing 3 or 4 releases a month, big compilations with dozens of tracks on them, introducing dozens of artists, which many have stayed on till today. And like with anything to do Section Z, it's just like, just don't know what we have. Like it's there's one point where in the label competition lineups at the end of the year, like it's Section Z and Monster Cat fighting for the top two.
I noticed that over the years.
Yeah, and here you have like Never Say Die starts to come up, right? And then all of a sudden Disciple shows up. And I remember the day and the conversation that I had with Rossi over at Never Say Die. I'm sorry, that's Rossi over at Disciple.
Okay.
When he wanted to start to work with Virtual Riot, he even asked to work with Savant, but Savant doesn't want to work with anybody. He worked with Section Z because he had to.
Right. He needed some form of management. That's the thing that I feel like, just to back up on Savant a little bit, that's one of the things that makes him unique. He's had complete control of his career since day one. It sounds like they had a little misstep at the beginning, but after that, he's had complete control over his career,
right?
Much like a jam band like Fish 100%. Or these independent artists like String Cheese Incident in the jam band world. And there's so many other independent artists that have, like Fugazi has complete control of their career. So nobody's telling them how to put anything out or when to put anything out. He put out 4 albums in 2012. And if you count 2011 and also 2013, he had like 7 albums.
Right.
That's some artist's entire career. And people think they're legends still to this day. And that was just 1 year for that dude.
He's sitting on that much more right now.
That's great.
Because like clearly, even though his output's been a little slower over the years, he hasn't been touring. He's just been, making music the entire time. So a lot to come from him. And, the pandemic reset a lot of things, and I'm really happy he's back home in Norway. I think California could suck up a man,
right?
And a woman, and they man, and an every man.
Well, one thing that he never thought about, which when I first met you guys years ago at a show in Eugene, I mentioned briefly backstage, but one thing that he's never thought about is that in Norway, or maybe has, in Norway, they don't fluoridate the water. There's no fluoride in the water in Norway. So he grew up his entire life in Norway with unfluoridated water. Then he moved to LA, which has been fluoridated since 2004. So regardless of how people feel about fluoride and its dental effects, it does have a psychic effect, energetic effect on your spiritual effect. So at first, you're feeling the sunshine of LA, the amazingness, but at some point that fluoride kicked in, and sometimes it kicks in, it influences your thoughts, it influences your feelings.
Oh, that was not lost on him.
Yeah, and it's not lost on him. He realized
it was not lost on him, because like 2 things that drove him crazy about the water in the United States was the amount of chlorine and the smell, right?
Right. It's like pool water.
And then the fluoride, like it was,
it's a drug.
It's an obsession when you know what it is. Like why is it in the water? But he like everybody that changes environment, love to make comparisons, and Alex's biggest strength is his ability to make analogies. So he made many analogies about the water in the U.S. that were not kind.
Yeah, I'm sure some aren't kid friendly. So tell me more. Look, dude, I want to know more about you as a person. Okay, we've heard about your life story. We're getting towards the end of Section Z, but I want to hear, because Section Z closed its doors in 2016. I want to hear real quick, why did Section Z close its doors in 2016? What was it? What was happening? Was the industry tapering off? Were you just getting tired of it? What happened around that time?
Relationships were strained. There was, a breakup between Shannon, Savant, and I.
Okay.
So those relationships like changed the dynamic of everything. And then I'll answer it with an event that happened in the future,
Okay.
if I may.
Sure, you can do anything.
So in 2019, I'm touring Strange Music with my artist Hush, who's signed to their label now. And he's walking us through this entire operation that has merchandising, printing, soundstage, recording studios, staff that's pouring through databases. Like, it's just the absolute perfect indie model, all self-contained to serve the artist. And that's why I shut SectionZ down, because it was becoming or at least like it needed to compete in a space with the Ultra records and the spin-in records and the template records. And I thought that things were becoming more just catering to the touring side of the music, and it was veering away from the listening side. So those two trends, plus the strains, plus then the absolute need to hunker down and understand and become a master at artist management, right? I'd done video games, I'd done internet, I'd done programming, I'd done team building, I'd sold a company, fucking got a patent, like worked for investment firms, but I still had not truly become an artist manager, right? And I needed to focus on that.
What was the deficiency you were feeling?
It wasn't a deficiency. It was simply a focus, right? It was understanding how to navigate in the music business. It was understanding how to navigate with my artists across those different things, publishing, touring, their merchandising, like really understanding the model to be something of, I want you to become an entrepreneur. I want you to own your business. I want you to learn this stuff. I don't want to be your servant, right? So the SectionZ management stuff up until that moment was like, okay, I'm just getting things done for you, even if it's a fucking fire that you started, right? Which, you know, as a manager, you got to do. But that's not what I wanted for the future of artist management. There's a catering because certain folks just don't want to do certain things and they delegate, right? But I want all my artists from the youngest age to know what publishing is, how that gets collected and adds up across all the countries. I want them to know how to create a publishing company and have separate bank accounts for that company, how to establish that company, how to pool with people to pay a lawyer to look at documents, how to do all the things that they need to do so that if their manager gets hit by a bus, some dude can't come and just take advantage of their bereavement and go like, oh man, this guy took care of everything. He has no idea how much money he has. I want them to become independent in a way that empowers them to become millions of artists, like there are actors, like there are stonemasons, like there are countless other bakers, other professions that seem to unionize and create homogenous environments that protect their interests.
Well, it seems like it's rooted in that same empathy and that same compassion and that same desire to serve the artists as your original ideas with SectionZ at its beginning. It's just mutated, right, changed, evolved with experience over 20 years.
Right. And now the model is a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think that artists need to become part of a collective. The idea of the artist in their closet can only exist if that artist can sustain themselves as such, right? And this isn't to say that like people need to force themselves to be social or be on Twitter or social media or like none of that stuff. But they need to be present in the participation of their business, right?
Which is a different model than what was taught for many, many decades.
Right. But they need to do it together so they can, one, make sure that they're holding each other accountable, that the people that are working for them are holding each other accountable, and that they can provide their own services. Like now the trend is, I used to just target singer, songwriter, producer. Now it's singer, songwriter, producer, graphic designer, 3D artist, video game level designer, like fucking Blender expert. Like there's a million different configurations now.
Right.
And
so you're trying to bring all those together.
Right. Bring them all together. Let them hire themselves, trade services, right? Themselves, and navigate the underground like that, instead of fall into these traps of managers that charge extreme amounts of money for features, or playlists, or connections, or A&R services, or I'll help you get your track to the right labels. Like, fucking just email the label. If it's a good track, they're gonna fucking take it.
Right, because they do listen to it. So you're saying the traditional manager role, these people that are out there now, they're trapping these kids with these ideas of kind of, like you said, gatekeeping for various things, or selling access. Well, you're saying the real method, the true method, not traditional, the true method is being there organically and helping them develop their own independence and self-sufficiency. So they're there on their own, but yet you're there guiding them. You're more of like a coach in a way than a manager.
The best labels, big and small, want direct relationships with their artists. And if the artists don't have a direct relationship with the people that are publishing, distributing, releasing, marketing their music, then what the fuck are they doing? It's important to have real relationships in this game. If you have transactional relationships in any industry, especially music, you are at the whim of that machine. If you want to control your destiny, you need to make sure that you have real, true relationships. And that's not bugging people over IM all the time. It's just being present, making sure that you ask the right questions, making sure that during your time of engagement, you're doing it right, and you have the right expectations, and you're talking to the right people, right?
So before we go too much further, I do want to just kind of get into how you got into Zyon, where you're at now. So the company that you're at now, and then we're going to talk about advice for up and coming artists. But I just want to cap off your story and tell us now, because right now you're heading a management company called Zyon, which is essentially, like we said in the beginning, an extension of what you were doing at SectionZ, an evolution where you're managing artists, you're helping them succeed, but now with a new name and a new face.
Well, it's defined now. Now I know what I'm doing, right? Now there's no SoundCloud. Now there's no having SoundCloud and not knowing it mistakes. There's none of that.
So did you get called back in the same way as you did when you got called back to SectionZ, to where you felt artists needing help, you felt the call to come back to Zyon?
No, this was more like the things that I learned in working, through those original 5 years, right, to the touring and all the artist discovery stuff at SectionZ. It was just, here's the refined version of that. Right. I needed to, and then it was also purposefully looking for artists that were outside of the norm industry, right? Like I wanted to open up where electronic music influence is made, right? Like the Middle East with Sultan and Jewel, the Cuba communities. Here, let me just back up a sec.
Sure.
So traditionally, the way that artists find managers is managers find artists. Number one. If you have something that needs managing, we're coming to knock it. Trust me, especially if you have fans that are managers that are already looking at you, right? And you're going to have them if you're in the genre, if you're in the music business. So just sit back, keep doing what you're doing, and the right ones are going to come begging to work with you. Ask Cedric. So then on that front, I wanted to make sure that I stopped working with the traditional suspects, right? Like your Savants from Norway, your FWLRs from Canada, your comfortable, like, suburban artists, right? And I wanted to find artists that really needed the help. Like, what's happening in Egypt? What's happening in Iran? What's happening in Cuba, right?
Right, because there's valid artists, incredible with this technology that's so accessible. There's now incredible artists creating this music all over the world. And in some of those places, they have limited internet access or they're impoverished, right. and they need that extra helping hand, whereas in America, it's so easy to get on the internet. It's not always like that in these other countries like you were naming.
Let's just take Cuba as an example. It's the cradle of Afro-Cuban rhythm. Like, dance music owes everything to Cuba, right? And now these kids got computers and they are jumping on the mobile internet, and their stuff is starting to permeate into the underground. And they've come online as a community. Like you usually have artists individually vying for the attention of the labels and the managers that like are doing stuff in the space. These kids were an entire pod of amazing talent, like 9-10 of them that live in a 4-block radius. Santa Clara, Cuba, and then they have counterparts in Havana, and there's a few of them there, and they're also doing amazing things. Like, Cuba's gonna explode. Think about it opening up for tourism from the United States. We have festivals and stuff starting to go down in Cuba to reopen up this majestic island that was once a hotbed of entertainment, period, is a rock's throw away from Miami, from Florida, right? You're going to have, and then now post-COVID, oh my God, it's just
people
going
are
to be
ready. For sure.
Party island. And what I want to make sure is that the powers that be just don't fucking fly their McDonald's over to Cuba and dump it and put speakers on it, and it's McDonald's C Cuba, right? Like, I want it to be, this is the natural talent that has been observing the world with their electronic music rhythms, right? And their Afro-Cuban rhythms. This is them now. Put them on stage first, right? Yeah, Skrillex could be at the top of the ticket. Okay, it's Skrillex, right? But everybody else on that ticket needs to be local. Needs to be like, this is the future that I dream of. So this is what I want Zyon to be.
A place for these artists to have a platform.
That's and to empower each other to have complete command and control. Like in Cuba, I can teach them, and they should already know, how to throw raves. Like, that's not a very difficult task. You could do that with technology from 30 years ago, because we used to do it 30 years ago, right? So we just have to go back a little bit to help the local scene understand what it is that they need to do to empower themselves as artists and producers and musicians locally to serve their local youth culture. And then in 18 months, when COVID is vaccinated to the point where we can really get back on the road again, and we can really have these festivals and these parties, and we can really come together as a planet again at midnight, it's going to be amazing. So this is what I want. This is what I want Zyon to be. I wanted to find communities of artists like this, empower them with the knowledge that we have, empower them with each other, right? They're all helping each other do their own artwork, their own animations. We're not using third parties. I'm not some magic manager like, don't worry about it. I'll come back with these things from a friend that I know. Nah, here's a community right now of 30 something artists that have complete access to each other, that are helping each other in every aspect. And then right now there's 2.5 managers, almost 3 managers in there, watching over what's going on, helping them understand, answering any questions that they have. And by the end of 2022, I want it to be 256 artists and 8 managers. And then by the end of 2023, I'm just doing the whole computer factor thing, 1,024 artists, and 64 managers, right? Like
that's a stellar vision.
And the managers work for the artists. It's going to become an artist union with bylaws that the artists write. We have our mandates. There's no longer I get 20% from all of these artists. Like, what a greedy fuck I would be if I would do that.
It's going to be a different paradigm.
A different paradigm, and then there is tying it to responsible cannabis culture, and bringing those two things together, which will help power the artist development, help power the services side of the management company, and the artists keep almost everything. Hook us up when you get that hit, right? Hook us up when we have to provide consulting and management services because you are managing a Billboard hit. That's good. We're going to make a lot of money when you do that, right? Because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it sounds like Zyon is rooted in love of the music, love of the artist, love of creating a situation where you can have the most successful experience as an artist. And so we've got caught up with Josh, not only to 2021, where we're at now, he actually showed us a glimpse of what's coming all the way up into 2024, which is incredible. This has been such a journey, and I'm so glad that you've been able to introduce yourself to our audience, because electronic music is an incredible power. It is incredible. But I just want to say really quick, you said you wanted more artists, but you also mentioned earlier that you're more of the perspective that the manager finds the artist. But are you taking artist submissions at Zyon.io right now?
Constantly, but anybody's listening to this, my methodology is either I find it or it's introduced to me directly by another artist in the group. Like, that's been my system since forever.
Whenever personal formula.
Right. Whenever I sign an album, the next project comes from that lineage, right? And then, wow, the artists themselves and the introductions they make. So I wouldn't know Wales if Sultan hadn't given Wales my contact information, so that I would have met him backstage at a Savant concert with Infected Mushroom in Israel when he was 14 years old. And that kid just had a massive release with Excision last week. Wow. On Subsidia Records, and he's an adult now, 20 years old. Or is he 19? Is he 19? He's not 14 anymore. I can't keep track. I smoke too much weed.
No, it's okay. It's Oregon. We love weed out here. That's what we do. I
get all my nutrients from.
Yeah. But okay, so what advice would you have now? Because there's going to be young electronic artists, potentially teenagers, but definitely across the spectrum that are going to be interested in what we're talking about and respecting you as a force in the industry. What advice could you give them starting out as the best way to promote themselves or get themselves noticed?
Well, rule number one, the only magic is the music. Everything else is work and relationships and then a lot of luck, right? Right place, right time. But what you need to do to get noticed today is, like with anything else that you're into, find that community. And start with your local community, right? Like it'll be easy to jump into some big ass Ableton group online or some big Discord with 6,000 people. But what about the 4 people at your college that are also interested in doing the same thing that you're doing, that's your path to get started. Like if you are able to truly connect with other people that have the same interests as you at that, I'm assuming this person is younger and they're getting started, right?
Sure.
But if you're able to make those connections right then and there, that's the beginning of it, because it never stops after that. It's constant connection for the next thing, constant connection for the next thing.
So you
over
find
and
your
over and over.
community, your community, and then you start making connections, and that's the beginnings of a professional career.
Period. Simple. No tricks, no cash advances.
And it's not that hard to do these days with things like Discord groups and various forums. There's all these places to connect online that are fairly designated. They're labeled and they're easy to find.
But then go from there and then drill down to your local.
Right.
Like find your local people. I mean, especially when we get out of this these lockdowns here, we're gonna really understand the value of these connections more than ever. But we've also learned how to work a little bit better via remote, which is kind of cool.
Well, there is this technology here, just like we're having this interview via Zoom, and you're in Chicago and I'm in Portland, Oregon. The technology has evolved. We now have had the time, because of the situation, to really focus on understanding how this technology can unite us and how it works and how to use it even more efficiently.
Right. And electronic music owes its entire, up and coming because of the evolution of technology. So no stranger to it on this side. What it's going to influence, that's what I'm interested in.
So what are some of the big trends in sounds that you are seeing on the horizon as a person that has decades of experience, and you've noticed these trends, you've noticed how sounds evolve? What are some of the trends and sounds that are coming in the electronic music scene?
So I'm hearing just a plethora of listening music, right? Music that carries a lot of melody, carries a lot of color, carries a lot of emotion. I think we are moving away from the heavy-handed, let's pack the room with sardines, kind of stuff. I think the trend is clearly melodic for the next several years.
Well, for the last few years, it was rhythm based and very heavy, and almost like the heavy metal of electronic music. Yeah. So, but that you're saying now it's moving away from rhythm towards this more compositionally structured, this more melodic music.
I heard ambient rhythm today.
What?
I heard ambient rhythm today. A 16-year-old kid from Germany. And he just needs some help with the mix.
Oh my God. That's why I love music. It never stops. It's infinite.
But what I mean is there's a trend that's going away from the club music, right? Because there's no clubs. So why would we continue to focus on club music? Then the other big ass trend is albums, big packages, like a trend away from the single flirty, I'm just going to talk to you for 3 minutes and then you're going to have to wait 3 months until I come back from the war kind of stuff, It's high time that electronic musicians serve their audiences directly. Stop serving them singles, stop trying to be relevant on social media, and start being, relevant in their fans, timelines and ears.
Right. Just give them essentially, it's the golden rule. Give the people what they want. Right. And if you find the people that you love and they love you, kind of try to resonate what their feelings are and try to, see if you can make music that matches that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying step away from the quickie culture of the last 10 years, right? Where you just had the quick drop and you did the tours and you went away, came back with another quick thing, did the tours, went away. And now that you've been home, spent a lot of time, with yourself, with your music, making albums, with your fans, a lot of artists didn't have the connections that they have with their artists now, right? Before this happened. Don't just try to jump back into what was happening before. Give them mountains of music. That's why they're following you. You know, they're not following you to know how you're fucking feeling in the morning. They love to know how you're feeling in the morning because they love your fucking music.
Right. So
that's it.
Just give them what they need, really, not just what they want, but what they need, the frequencies. They need the healing that comes from that. And this is a perfect segue into something that I want to ask you about. We usually wrap it up about an hour and a half or so, but we're feeling good. It's about an hour and 15. I just want to talk to you about something. We like to talk about spiritual things on Midnight on Earth. We've had Egyptian shamans on and Hungarian shamans. And I just want to know what your thoughts are about an EDM artist, a producer on a stage, fulfilling some sort of shamanic role. Because it seems when people get together at these shows, it's no secret that a lot of them are on psychedelic drugs. And when we're together in a group and there's several, potentially thousands of humans taking psychedelic drugs together, it creates a certain frequency, a certain energy that then the guiding force, the music, is the shaman fulfills a shamanic role. And that could be fulfilled by the DJ. Now, Josh, how many of the artists that you've worked with are cognizant of the shamanic aspect of electronic music?
I'd say that two of the artists that I've worked with understand it like that, right? Like Alex being one of them because he's just connected to the ether. It's a skill that I think all artists should have, right? Like, what is that feeling? What is that connection? It's not
because they're guiding people through an experience, especially when they're on these psychedelic drugs, whether it's MDMA, which is popular in the electronic music scene, or LSD, and now everybody is kind of together using DMT. So it's kind of like when these people are doing this collectively, and then there's this guiding force. I mean, they're the ones controlling these people's trips in a way.
But here's the thing. Like, I've seen folks just go into absolute trance with nothing. They're just there.
Right.
Like, I have a picture that I wish I could just. I'll show you. I'll send it to you later.
Okay.
But it's a picture of like fans just reaching for the artist. Like, oh my God. Like literally, like they're reaching for God, right? Like they need this in their lives. This moment is one for them. And artists, the most humble artists that I've worked with are the ones that realize it the most, right?
Okay.
Like they see the change that they cause in people when they play for them. And I've seen it. I've seen the swarms of people just come after artists backstage, like with their eyes not glazed over because they're on E. Well, maybe one of them E, maybe another's on DMT. They're just excited to see the creator of this music and this sound that they're such big fans of, and that's a high that that's a high that I understand because I have my moments with the music like that, with fandom too, with just the people who create it. I mean, the reason I work with artists and go through all this shit is because I just love them. And I fall in love with talent.
I was going to say, Josh, that I've seen a significant amount of live music in my life. I've probably seen 800, 900 concerts. I was I still am a big jam band fan. I was a bigger jam band fan when I was younger, saw a considerable amount of shows, but of course I love all music. So I've seen a lot of concerts. In my entire concert history, I've never seen an artist be chased out of a building by the crowd. And I saw that when I saw Savant in Eugene, Oregon back in 2015. The crowd chased him outside like a mob, and they followed him out the back door. I've never seen anything like it. It was absolutely astounding. And that's the same power. That's that energy you're talking about.
Right. Right. It's exactly that. And it's very special.
Yeah.
And not all artists achieve this, especially the ones that follow other artists. Right. And I need to make that absolutely clear. The only people that I've seen this kind of shit happen to are the trailblazers, right? Like the ones who refuse to play by the rules. And that doesn't mean that they're assholes. They can be. That doesn't mean that they're impossible to work with. They can be. It's just that they know their vision. And that's really the manager's job, is to make sure that shit happens. If the vision is to be a pimp at the pimp convention, then so be it, right? If it's as long as we make sure we get publicity. Will you agree with me on that? Can we get publicity if we take you to the pimp convention? Like, you this is what the manager's for.
Well, you did say there was 2 artists, Savant, Alexander Vinter being one of them, that could feel that shamanic energy, that tapped into that understanding. What was the second artist?
Mr. Bill.
Okay,
Bill,
of course. Mr. Bill's amazing.
And he loves fucking DMT and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He's totally into it. Like, some of the coolest conversations I've had around music and the psyche and stuff was 2013, 14 with Mr. Bill.
Oh, wow.
He likes to talk about music, and that's why he's so good at it.
He's a loving human. I'm a loving human. You're a loving human. Josh, I want to thank you for your time here. I know we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I know that you do have to get back to your wonderful family there in Chicago. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with that you feel like they should know? Is there any kind of big, profound thought that you want to leave this audience with before we move on?
We think at the speed of sound. So that means music is our natural language, period. That's it. I'll leave you with that.
Oh my God. That's absolutely amazing. Okay. So if you're interested in Josh Hernandez, check out Zyon, Zyon.io, Zyon.io. Go over there.
Or noise.fm.
Or Noise, which is Zyon backwards, NOYZ.fm. Does that have a lot of your current artist roster on it?
And there's another 6 or 7 that are going up next week.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so noise.fm for incredible music. Please, all of you go check that out. If you're an artist, you're an electronic artist, and you're feeling inspired, you feel connected to me and Josh in this conversation, send him an email, Zyon.io. And Josh, I just want to thank you for being here. And we're going to go ahead and play this outro music. And everybody, we'll see you next week. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on.